So how can evolution and the creation story fit together? It is possible. So basically, let's dive in there, right? So we have humanity as part of the evolutionary process, whereby the first kind of human form that developed is millions of years old, right? So then in contrast to that, you have the creation story and you have Adam, right? Now, my own sort of personal take on this after hours and hours of research is that Adam can be seen as a real person because, you know, obviously looking at the genealogies in Luke, it very clearly sort of says that, you know, the fall was through one man and salvation is through one man. So that's a nice analogy, a nice picture of the fall coming through one person, Adam, physical person, of which there was a line that goes all the way to Jesus, right? Now, how then do we reconcile the evolution of man and then the fall of man through one person way later than when the first Homo sapien life forms were around, right? And we're talking way before Neolithic man or anything like that, right? So basically, the way in which one can look at this is that Adam is a human, let's say 6,000-ish years ago, where in terms of the evolutionary timing of man becomes advanced enough in terms of God's plan that it's the right time for him to intervene with that man, Adam, to reveal to him moral agency, okay? The capacity to choose God's way or his own way, right? Now, in terms of the actual Garden of Eden story, whether or not a serpent turns up, deceives Eve, then offers Adam the apple, Adam makes a conscious decision between God's will and his own will and chooses the latter. I personally don't think that necessarily matters whether it's a real scenario or whether it's more of a theological picture, right? I don't think that matters too much because we know what's happened since the fall, however it actually happened in the garden or not, as the case may be. Now, in terms of, you know, Middle Eastern storytelling of the time, if you think about 6,000 years ago, there weren't pens and paper, right? And, you know, in terms of things like folklore and other cultures, it's very common that sort of prominent stories or poignant stories were put together to carry critical messages from generation to generation through speech, right? Through stories, to remember the information. So, you know, I'm not saying for one second that the Garden of Eden isn't potentially an actually true situation, right? Because God can do anything he wants, and who am I, right? But one could say that it's a story, right? That's encapsulating the fact that Adam had a, you know, choice to make, however that came about, to either go the Lord's way or his own way. And he was the very first human that ever got that opportunity to do that. And prior to that, right, mankind, humanity, is not subject to making a decision. They do not have the capacity for moral agency. So in terms of then fitting that back to God when he says that he made creation and he made man and it was good, one might question, well, hold a minute, if it was good, how come it fell, right? So the point we're making here is that when he originally designed humanity right back at the beginning through the evolutionary process, of course it was good, right? Nobody had moral agency. Everything happened out of instinct, right? So there is no choice between right and wrong. You're just surviving, right? But at some point in the advancement of mankind, God chooses in his own perfect timing that it's now time to give Adam the chance to go the Lord's way and have a relationship with the Lord in that manner, or go his own way. He chooses the latter, however that happens, right? And it's worth noting here that Eve is deceived. She's not actually made a decision between right and wrong. She was tricked, whereas Adam wasn't tricked, right? Adam made his own conscious decision when Eve said, do you want a bit of the apple, or whatever happened, right? And he chose to go his own way, knowing that it was against God's will. That was the reason why Adam is the one where the fall kind of instigated from, right? So at this point, we have this decision where Adam has gone his own way. Now, at this point, it's very clear in the Bible. It says that the fall happened through one man, right? Now, it is not possible for all of mankind to have come from Adam and Eve, right? It is scientifically impossible for the whole of the human race post-Adam to have come from Adam and Eve. So I think analogously, or the analogy here, is that Jesus, for example, we're not all like, when Jesus saves everyone and we're grafted in to Abraham's family, we're not from Abraham, we're grafted into his family. The same way, if you turn that on its head, the infection of the fall is permeated to every man, every person born post Adam. So Adam is the instigator, but through him, we're kind of grafted in to the fallen family of Adam at that point. We don't have to be descendants of him. So we don't have to be tying ourselves up in knots about, whether we come from Adam or whether we don't, right? It doesn't need to come from Adam to be infected by the fall. The same way we don't need to be a descendant of Abraham physically, biologically, to be able to be grafted into his family when we're saved, right? So that all completely stacks up nicely at that point, between the evolution of mankind to a point that is good in design. Then Adam is chosen to be revealed moral agency, who decides at that point to reject God. At that point, all mankind is then infected with the same problem. And then, of course, we're all then born, as we know, a slave to the sinful nature, as dictated by God when Adam was punished for doing what he did, right? So that's the basic nuts and bolts about how evolution can sit alongside the creation story. And, hopefully that helps to provide some logic, between some of the scientific evidence, the powerful scientific evidence out there for the evolution of mankind, along with sitting with the creation story, and how those two can sit together without too much tension, effectively. Yeah, so it's worth noting that when I was talking about God saying things were good, right, and obviously then in the Garden of Eden or whatever it was, before Adam fell, we understand this concept that everything was in harmony, right, with God. And Adam and Eve walked in the garden or whatever they were doing in harmony with the Lord. And that was why I was trying to put that together between the fact there was harmony. Well, how could there be harmony before? If humans existed before Adam, they didn't have moral agency. So in terms of God's design being good, they were also perfectly in harmony with God, because they were basically fulfilling God's plan at that point, until God changed that plan, moved that goalpost, if you like, and brought in that moral agency piece, right? And that's when it became obviously not in harmony with him anymore. Adam goes his own way. God does what he does, as you know, in Genesis. And then the other thing I was going to say was that obviously at that point he says that you're going to find life difficult now, right? Now, obviously, like, life didn't suddenly become difficult. Like, the earth didn't suddenly become a very different place, because, obviously before Adam and mankind has been evolving, there's been, disease, there's been earthquake, there's been all sorts of stuff, right, prior to that. So it wasn't that all of a sudden, everything was going to become hard work when it wasn't hard work before. But obviously there's a couple of things there, One is, suddenly now when you've got moral agency and you know that there is perfection, but you can't attain it. And that happens even now, let alone when Adam would have known when he was, either booted out of the Garden of Eden or whatever happened, he now knows that he can't get back to that harmonious state with the Lord. And so his life is a lot harder. And the ground, he has to toil, etc., etc. Now, I imagine you would have had to toil before as well, right? So again, I think there's an element of toil in humanity post-Adam because of a different level of consciousness that we're now aspiring to, because you can see, you can make decisions. You also have power. You have the ability to make decisions for right or for wrong, to better yourself, to get ahead of somebody else, etc. Now, all of that would have been instinctive previously. But now there's a whole other level, because there's a whole kind of element of striving, which isn't just sort of instinctive survival. It's another level now that comes in, which we now see outworking in humanity, even now, thousands and thousands of years later, where we're in a state now where everything is driven by self-orientated power, gain, money, stabbing people in the back, whatever it might be, So I suppose the kind of rounding this off, the key message I really want to put across in this particular episode, right, is I don't think that we should sort of, I'm not saying anyone is, by the way, sort of, radicalize the creation story and then negate science. I think that's really, really important and healthy to kind of embrace both the worlds of what incredible work we've done to understand our origins from an evolutionary perspective, at the same time as understanding and grappling almost with, the reality of what we know about the kingdom of God in terms of how, the first human or Adam or whatever, fell, and the results of what that happened for humanity as well. So I think that's why I kind of delved into a bit to try and bring some kind of, joining of the two worlds, so that, we respect the world of science and can fit in, the world of God's, of the creation story, if you like, alongside it. I think, as I say, as a key takeaway, I think, Adam was probably a real person. If he wasn't, he could also be, a theological representation of mankind at the time that they were given moral agency. I think there can be a distinction made between God deciding to give humanity moral agency, and before that time he didn't, and therefore they were harmonious with him until that point, even prior to Adam. And then obviously when Adam then does make the decision to go his own way, that then is something that's permeated, not biologically, although it is biologically as well, to Jesus, until obviously Jesus is not scarred by it, as he was without sin. But all mankind can easily be grafted in, the same as they're grafted into Abraham's family when saved. They're grafted in when born into Adam's fallen family. And I suppose that's the sort of takeaway really from it, to bring together the fact that evolution could easily sit alongside the time in which the advancement of the human race comes to the point where God decides to intervene and present an opportunity for moral agency or not.